What's up, everybody? I am your host, a three-legged goat just trying to get to the other side of the farm. And that is my co-host, a demonic entity that feeds on your misery and despair. He's also the one that tore off my leg for no fucking reason. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we are talking about a movie that's beautifully crafted and has been described as relentlessly bleak. On this episode, we are diving into Bryan Bertino's The Dark and the Wicked from 2020. So this is my pick, and the reason that I chose it was mainly because I think this gets overlooked a lot, and I'm surprised that I really don't hear many people talking about it. It has a very specific feel, which is similar to like an A24 or a neon horror movie, and in many ways feels like it, kind of like an Osgood Perkins film. And I actually saw a lot of people compare this to Hereditary, at least when it comes to like the style and the atmosphere. And many other people compare it with When Evil Lurks, which I think is another really good comparison.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very dark. I could see When Evil Lurks being a good one. Hereditary as far as the dark atmosphere. Almost like that and The Lodge with kind of
Another
the
good one, yeah.
if you took all the snow away and you added even more despair.
Dead fields of grass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one that I think the superstar of this movie is the cinematography.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But yeah, I figured this is perfect for this show, and not to mention, this movie got fucked by COVID shutting down the theaters. So this is also an attempt to introduce it to some people that have never heard of it. I will warn you right off the bat, this is, not a movie for everyone. It's definitely one of those slow burns, and you kind of got to read between the lines, a little bit to get the whole story. I actually came across a ton of people who hated the lack of clear answers, which I think we can solve that problem today. But yeah, there was also a lot of people who were not fans of the ending.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we're gonna solve the answers for everybody. There's some really, really good theories out there that we'll get into that I think really changes the scope of this movie. And I almost wish that they would have made it a little more on the nose for those that you know, not quite gonna pick up on this. I mean, when we get into the theory, I will say, like, my first time watching this, I didn't pick up on it, and it really shines a different light on the movie as a whole. But the ending, yeah, that was another one that's some people hate a grim ending, and then others hate, like, a kinda seems like you're in the middle of the climax, and it just kinda shuts off without, really answering all the questions, and I definitely could see the hate for that. I like a grim ending, so I'm
Yeah.
not one of those people, but yeah, there's definitely I would say maybe 75% of the people out there from what I could see hated that aspect, and then there was about 25% that absolutely fucking loved it.
Yeah, this has a kind of fucked up twist ending. Um, watch the movie first. If you haven't seen the movie first, watch it first and then come back to this episode because we're obviously going to very much spoil the ending. But with that being said, are you ready to dive into The Dark and the Wicked?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at grindhousehorrorpod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes, as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and you don't want me to sneak out of the house in the middle of the night, leaving Jordan all alone with a demon who hates goats, give us a review. The Dark and the Wicked is a 2020 American Southern Gothic supernatural horror film written and directed by Bryan Bertino. It stars Marin Ireland and Michael Abbott Jr. The story follows two siblings who are summoned back to the family farm to await the inevitable death of their father. And what initially appears to be a timeless ritual of loss and remembrance turns out to be something very different. It was produced by Unbroken Pictures, the traveling picture show company, and Inwood Road Films. It was released on November 6th of 2020 and had a box office of around $422,000. We'll explain that here in a bit, but I also could not find any info on the budget. But yeah, before we dive into it, I want to talk a little bit about the writer and director, Bryan Bertino. So Bertino is a filmmaker from Crowley, Texas, who burst onto the horror scene with the modern classic The Strangers from 2008, which we are both big fans of. And that movie turned its $9 million budget into an $82.4 million box office, making it one of the most profitable horror films of that decade. He then went on to make the films Mockingbird in 2014, The Monster in 2016, The Strangers Prey at Night in 2018, and then came The Dark and the Wicked in 2020. And if you pay close attention, you will pick up on the fact that Bertino has a very specific style and theme that he is known for, which is writing and directing stories that focus on the horrors of grief, how random evil can be when it comes to who will be a target, and no matter what the characters do, evil always wins, leaving us with some very bleak and grim endings, which some people love, some people hate. Fun fact, too, he was also one of the producers who helped get the Black Coat's Daughter, and he's out there off the ground, which are kind of similar style movies.
Yeah, you definitely can pick up his style as far as the ending, the very dark ending, but specifically looking at The Strangers, but also that the way he uses cinematography to he does it and it's my favorite part of The Strangers, which is where the guy's in the house and you don't know
Yeah.
yet,
Mm-hmm.
or the character doesn't know yet. But he has a similar shot in this movie, which
Yeah, he does.
really is a great way to build tension with the audience.
Yeah.
When you know that the characters don't know that whatever evil or person is already in the house, like they're in much more danger than what they think.
Yep. So after wrapping up on The Strangers Prey at Night, Bertino decided he wanted to tell a story about how extreme grief can overwhelm you so much that you feel like you have no reason to keep living, using a supernatural demonic force as a stand-in for those emotions. But this wouldn't be your standard possession movie, because Bertino had two very important details that would greatly help him shape the film and allow it to stand out amongst its fellow demonic possession movies of the, past decade or so. So one, Bertino didn't want religion to be at the center of the story. And the reason why is because that typically allows the main characters to defeat the entity in the final acts, and even in some cases, helps explain why the possession happened in the first place. But one of the main goals of The Dark and the Wicked was to show just how random evil really is, with Bertino pointing out that evil in the world doesn't care if you are religious or not. It touches everybody despite your beliefs or non-beliefs. which is what led him to write The Dark and the Wicked's Straker family as confident atheists despite taking place in rural Texas, which, if you don't know, is overwhelmingly made up of Christian conservatives. The second most important thing that majorly shaped this story was the fact that Bertino had the perfect place in mind when it comes to the film's setting, which needed to be able to amp up the bleak and dreary feeling of the film while also isolating the characters from the outside world while they sink further and further into madness. And that place would be Bertino's childhood home, where he spent the majority of his life working with the animals and the barren natural environment, learning to deal with long periods of isolation with only his small immediate family to keep him company. And this place is indeed a real farm located in Toller, Texas, which is just outside of the small town of Granbury. And it is still to this day owned by his father and stepmother, who were more than willing to let Bryan film the movie there. So this is his family farm.
Yeah, I mean, no better place to try to get permission to shoot a movie than something that your family already owns, and it's not like there's a whole lot going on out here.
Well, I think this is, probably one of the biggest factors when it comes to this dark, depressing, isolated vibe that this movie has. It is a perfect filming location for a movie like this. And this is also really smart because he already knows where all the creepy ass shit is. Like, he knows where all the dark corners are, all the vast empty stretches of land that are, surrounding the place. And that's what gives us this isolated, almost trapped feeling.
I wonder if when he grew up, like, he had aspirations to be a filmmaker. Like, if
Yeah,
that
good question.
'cause you would think, like, if that was the case and you were a kid, or in your early teens and you knew that's what you wanted to do with your life, you would already be thinking of stuff. You're isolated out here, not a whole lot to do, I would imagine, in this area, and he's probably already thought of, like, different shots or different
Yeah.
things that would be cool, like, what would in particular be, like, really scary, as far as this particular setting, which kinda goes into I don't wanna tip my hat at one of the theories of what this movie's about, but you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, and,
Mhm.
yeah, it would just a lot of, probably more than any other place in his life, he's thought of what would be really cool, from a horror movie perspective at this particular location.
I think that there was at least some kind of idea that he wanted to do a movie there because he never looked for another place. Like, he wrote the movie with this place in mind. And then I do know that when he, got the cinematographer and everything, he already knew what he wanted. He had already had an idea of, what kind of cinematographer he even wanted because of the place. So I think there was at least some kind of forethought in that. So according to Michael Abbott Jr., who plays Michael, when asked about this, he says, quote, "The fact that we were able to shoot it on Brian's childhood farm was amazing. This is such a personal film for him, so he knew exactly what he wanted to show. One of the things that initially drew me to the script was the fact that the location becomes not only a character, but also an important part of the story." He followed this up by adding, "Being in the middle of nowhere where there are no neighbors to be found and no one had any idea, that they were out there or what they were doing was genuinely a unique production experience." And just in case you are wondering, yes, all the animals in the film are owned by the Bertino family and they live there on the farm.
Including the ones that are slaughtered.
Well, I think they were CGI. Threw me off on that. I was like, was there animals
Yeah,
killed in this?
the
No, I don't remember that.
confusion.
So when attempting to project grief, regret, and hopelessness on the screen, getting an old, creepy farm in the middle of the Texas desert is only half the battle, and Bertino knew this, which is exactly why he hired cinematographer Tristan Nyby, who Bertino had developed a close working relationship with over the years. Nyby decided to use muted earth tones like dead shades of brown, beige, and gray in order to reflect the family's deep grief and exhaustion. They also used low key lighting inside the old isolated farmhouse, allowing them to create lingering shadows that would help hide subtle, disturbing figures and shifting shapes at the edge of the frame. And last but not least, they used wide and aerial shots of the rural Texas farm in order to capture the vast emptiness of the surroundings, making even the afternoon daytime scenes feel just as menacing as the dark corners and hallways as the house at night. And because this setting was so perfect for this kind of story, Bertino decided most of the camera movements would be slow and deliberate, letting the dread build as the seconds ticked by rather than relying on cheap editing tricks to scare the audience. This is why we get those awesome lingering camera shots where we hold on like an empty doorway that's, almost consumed by shadow. We're looking into the vastness of these fields where almost nothing is happening, but your eyes are still constantly scanning for the threat. And this is a really natural way to build anxiety and dread in your audience.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When you're watching a movie, when you get those extended shots, you expect something. Like you expect there to be a reason that the shot is continuing or focusing in on something specific, like
Yeah.
an empty field or
Hmm.
doorway. So those just naturally build dread. And even more so when nothing happens, because then you think, "Okay, this is building to something. They are setting me up for something to
Yeah.
come up." And, yeah, I think there was going back to, like, the cinematographer using, like, earth tones and stuff to really, bring out the dread and the grief. I mean, I feel like this would probably be the easiest movie that she probably ever had to do
Yeah.
because there's nothing more like nothing that says, isolation and grief more than a giant, old, rundown farm.
And literally nothing as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, production designer Scott Colquitt deliberately focused on the home's ordinary and rustic feel rather than going for a more conventional gothic horror aesthetic. And because this was a real lived in old creepy home, Colquitt decided to visually focus on the details like chipping paint, worn wood, and aged furniture along with appliances. And when you add all of this together, you get exactly what makes this film so unsettling.
I think that a giant part of this movie is, grief and, family relationships.
Yeah.
And there's no better setting for, like, family trauma and, grief over generations and generations than an old farm like this.
Yeah.
Because when you see this, when you see, like, an old rundown family farm, your first thought is, like, there's been a lot of generations of this family
A
that's
lot
probably
of family lived there, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and, that once again points at this being a perfect setting.
So once filming wrapped and post-production finished up, the movie was scheduled for its world premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival. That was until a little thing called COVID derailed the world, forcing everyone to stay locked in their houses and effectively shut down almost all of the movie theaters and film festivals. Now, despite this, it did still premiere a few months later on August 28th of 2020, but it was switched over to the Fantasia Film Festival, which because of COVID had to be changed to virtual only. And this is why the movie only had that $422,000 box office, and it didn't really pick up any traction until it hit streaming, which was on November 6th of 2020. Now, despite this train wreck of a release, most critics loved the film for its unsettling story, deep dread, bleak outlook, and anxiety driven atmosphere, with Dan Stubbs calling the film a quote, relentlessly bleak Southern Gothic modern horror movie. The film holds an approval rating of 91% based on 107 critic reviews and an average rating of 7.5 out of 10. Critics on Rotten Tomatoes have repeatedly cited it as one of the best horror films of the 2020s, And Screen Rant liked it so much, they ran an article on their website that specifically talks about how the director of The Strangers made one of the best horror movies of the decade, and hardly anyone saw it thanks to COVID.
Yeah, fuck you, COVID. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Now, not everybody has given the movie such high praises, with reviewers such as Kath Clark scoring it at a 3 out of 5 stars and pointing out that, quote, there is possibly not a single scary moment that will be new to horror fans. But in that same review, he also praises Bertino's directing and style. Kate Erbland was much more critical of the film, giving it a C and praising some of the performances, but wrote, quote, despite a strong start, it never becomes anything more than a collection of chilling images and paper-thin logic.
Yeah,
Wow.
I have a feeling that Kate is not a fan of, dreadful endings.
Yeah, or, slow burn type stories.
It
Like I said, this movie's not for everybody. Slow burns are not for everybody. I still to this day see people trash Hereditary.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy to me. I think Hereditary is by far, when you talk about the 2010s, it's up there in the top 3 movies of that entire decade.
Yeah, people. There's always people. Like I've seen Hereditary, The Babadook, Long Legs, Hansel and Gretel, like all these kind of slow burn, really good looking films. It's just not for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of it. It's
Yeah,
art,
that's true.
you're never going to make everybody happy. Well, one person's, favorite canvas art piece is another person's confusion. They
Yeah,
look at it and say, "Why would anybody ever like this?" So,
not everybody wants a Picasso.
yeah,
Mm,
that is the beauty of art is, despite what one person might say, that you're gonna find your audience. And this one, I think, I have grown to love slow burns as long as they pay off correctly.
agree.
And I could see some people who like slow burns and still didn't like the payoff because
Yeah.
there's certain questions that are not answered or are not obviously answered in your face. So yeah, I mean, you can't make everybody happy.
So, needless to say, despite a rocky start and a few critics here and there having negative things to say about the film, critics mostly praised it. Unfortunately, though, audiences would be way more divided, with many praising the atmosphere, tone, acting, and overall feel of the film, with others claiming that the movie was boring, lacking story, and left many questions never to be answered. Now, despite all of that, the most dividing subject when it comes to The Dark and the Wicked is no doubtably the ending, which we're not going to spoil yet because we're going to go over it in a little bit. But yeah, this movie doesn't wrap everything up in a nice little bow and end with a happily ever after.
No, no, it definitely doesn't. And even with some of the really cool theories, there's still questions that are not answered.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I do have some stuff from the writer director that I think covers a lot of stuff. If you at least add it with what happens in the film, but there are still some theories because not everything is explained. But yeah, this is extremely divided. If you look at any like comment sections or message boards, from what I saw, it was probably about 60-40 with most people hating the ending and also the ending itself is split with, some disliking it because of what happens, to the characters and others having an issue with just stuff not being explained. So yeah, it is a divided movie. After I read, like, a lot of comments on, say, Reddit over the last few days, it just appears that there is a lot of stuff that kinda goes over people's heads, and it went over my head originally too. You gotta watch it a few times, you gotta pay really close attention, you almost gotta add the stuff up, and, the whole reason that this demonic presence isn't explained by Bertino is because he wanted to show how evil doesn't need to be conjured up, or it doesn't need to be invited into people's lives, like, evil is more akin to, like, a tornado, it just shows up, It destroys what it wants, it kills what it wants, it has no sympathy about any of it, and then it just moves on.
Yeah.
And that's why it's not explained, because it's just a thing that happens. And I actually saw, some people say that Bertino was just lazy and didn't wanna write an actual explanation to the story.
Yeah,
And
I completely disagree with that. I think the tornado reference is good. You know, whether you believe in tornadoes or you don't, it's not gonna stop a tornado from ripping through your house. And they actually touch on that with some of the dialogue in the movie at one point in the plot. There is a character that specifically is like, it doesn't matter what you believe in, like it's
yeah.
here, whether you believe in it or not. And then there's also a very underlying theory that makes a lot of things make sense that a lot of horror fans are gonna miss. I missed it on my first watch, but people who aren't horror fans have no chance at catching this. So,
Yeah.
if you're just a regular critic and you're not a big horror fan, you're gonna miss that. Like, you could watch this 10 times and you're not gonna pick up on it, and it really does put a lot of the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, if you've ever seen, like, news footage or interviews after, a whole fucking neighborhood or town in, like, Wyoming is destroyed by a tornado that just came out of nowhere, and they're like, "Well, it hit this house, jumped this house, hit the house next to it," like, nobody knows why it left the house as it left. But that's what this movie is, like, that's what it's saying evil is it no one really knows why. It just kinda does whatever it wants to do, and that's why there's no answer, not because he didn't write it, because there is no answer. So anyway, since its release, critics have noted how the film blends elements from The Exorcist and The Shining to memorable effect, while Bertino himself has cited the same instincts that drove his 2008 smash hit The Strangers is the same that drove this film, which is keeping things grounded, real, and rooted in genuine human fear rather than genuine convention. The film has been compared favorably to the works of Osgood Perkins, specifically The Black Coat's Daughter, like I mentioned. He actually helped produce. But yeah, he kind of has a style and a bleakness that he likes to his movies, and then also very real and grounded.
Well, I think that's part of what makes it scary too
Yeah,
is the psychology will tell you the number one thing that humans fear the most is the fear of the
unknown.
unknown.
Yep,
And whenever you're able to capture that in a movie and do it successfully, although some people may hate it for that, other people are going to really praise it. It builds a sense of anxiety and dread even after the credits roll.
yep. So thanks to streaming, specifically Shudder in this case, The Dark and the Wicked managed to shine through the whole mess caused by COVID, eventually growing a fan base of diehard horror cinema fans that mostly focus on stuff like cinematography, color palette, deep undertones, and overall atmosphere, rather than traditional storytelling and scares, which has led to it getting a couple of different physical media releases. Starting with the standard Blu-ray that released on December 15th of 2020 by RLJE Films, and this was followed by the standard 4K UHD Blu-ray version that was released on March 27th of 2025. I believe this was originally released in Germany. I don't think the US got a 4K distribution deal with this movie. I couldn't find one. I didn't spend a lot of time looking for it, but I think that this is the only 4K version of the movie.
I could see like a second sight picking this up
Oh,
at some point.
I would buy it. I would
Like
100% buy it.
this is definitely one of those very, very cinematography, lot of symbolism, very dark. Seems like it's right up Second Sight's alley.
Agreed. All right, so ratings Rotten Tom 91%. IMDb is 6.1 out of 10. Letterboxd a 3 out of 5. And the Google average audience rating is a 3.7 out of 5. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming with a subscription to AMC Plus or Shudder on any of the major streaming platforms. or you can rent it on Google Play, Fandango, and Apple TV for $3.99. I think I actually bought my Blu-ray from Amazon for fairly decent price, maybe like 13 or $14.
Ah,
Yeah, I don't
that's
think it was
pretty
much.
good.
Yeah.
I have to pick that up.
Yep. It's worth it, man. It's a good looking movie. All right, so you ready to dive into the plot?
I am.
All right, so we immediately start out at the main setting of the film, which is an old farm located in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And this is where we meet Virginia Straker, an elderly woman who has lived here for decades and is currently making a dress for her adult daughter. As we will learn throughout the film, the farm has an old house, which is where Virginia and her husband live, a small barn that is split into two different areas, which are used for the many goats the family owns, and Virginia's fabric and sewing studio, which is where we see her currently. And as she starts to cut some fabric, she begins to sing a religious song that starts out with every trial and temptation. Is there trouble anywhere? What a friend we have in Jesus. And the reason I bring this up is because this is going to come back a lot and it's going to be very important later on.
Yeah, I think you let a little bit of the cat out the bag whenever you mentioned this family not really being super religious. Yeah, so this is extremely important right out the gate.
So, anyway, as she's singing this song, right as she gets to the Jesus part, she gets suddenly startled by a sound coming from next door where the goats live. And this is pretty unusual because, as we are about to see, it's very late in the evening and it's already dark. The first time I watched this, when we lingered on the mannequins, I was sure something like creepy was going to happen with the mannequins. Like one of them was going to come alive or something. It's very creepy and I love it. It's a good shot.
Yeah, the mannequins are fucking
Mannequins
super
are just, they're
terrifying.
just creepy in
Just
general.
no matter where you put them, you could
Yeah.
put them in the middle of a comedy, and it's gonna freak me out.
So next we see Virginia leave to go check on the goats, who are definitely a little spooked by something, but she doesn't find anything, which prompts her to call it a night and head into the house. And this is where it is revealed that Virginia's husband, David, is severely unwell, bedridden, and unconscious. He obviously has, some kind of terminal illness or, major organ failure. I'm not sure. It's not fully revealed what's wrong with him in the movie. But yeah, he's he's pretty fucked up. So after checking on him, she heads to the kitchen, and while sitting at the table writing something, she is suddenly startled again by the sounds of a howling wolf in the distance. But before we can really see her reaction, we cut back over to the goats, who get the shit scared out of them when an invisible presence quickly enters the building. So on this goat enclosure barn thing, there's like a large opening that doesn't have a door. And what they've done is they've hung a thin rope from one side to the other and then tied horseshoes and like glass bottles to it. That way, if anything tries to get like in or out, the bottles and the horseshoes will make like a bunch of noise. This also helps like keep the goats in because they get like easily startled by loud noises. I actually had to look this up about what would be the point of this thing. It's kind of for both.
This is what you call a, 5-star alarm system
Yeah,
in the middle of
it's
Texas.
true. So the bottles and the metal shoes are what makes the loud noise that causes the goats to start like running around all paranoid and shit, freaking out. But about a minute or so later, they calm down once they realize there seems to be no threat nearby. But if you pay really close attention, you will see just a split-second shot revealing some kind of demonic creature hiding amongst the animals, telling us that the reason Virginia is acting the way she is probably has something to do with what we just saw in this goat barn.
Yeah, it is really hard to, pick up, but I did get a really good, freeze frame of it, and then I went in and, played with the photo settings, and, if anybody's interested, I'll post it on the comments on the Facebook, but I do wanna show you real quick because it is fucking really awesome whenever you when you adjust the photo settings where you can see it really good.
Yeah, I got a picture, but that's actually a little that's better than mine. More
Yeah,
clear than mine, and you definitely brought out a lot more of the facial features of it. But
yeah,
it is very menacing
yeah,
and
when you
creepy.
play with the contrast, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also kinda very clear what it is.
Yeah. So after that, we then cut back to Virginia, who is still in the kitchen, but this time she's standing at the counter cutting up some onions when she suddenly hears the sound of wood scraping across the floor right behind her. And as she stops and turns around, she sees that the chair that she was just sitting in has suddenly moved about 3 feet away from the table and is now turned facing her. And as she stands there, we notice she doesn't seem very surprised about this. Kind of the opposite reaction we just saw a few minutes ago, where she was startled by the sounds of the wolf, which tells us that either there's something, suddenly wrong with her, or she's been dealing with this supernatural shit for some time. But right as she stands looking directly at the chair, the screen goes black, displaying the very simple title card, The Dark and the Wicked. So, as we head into the next morning, we are informed that it is Monday. The reason that's important is because this story takes place over the span of just 6 days. And pretty much immediately, we are introduced to the rest of our main characters, which is Louise Straker, Virginia and David's adult daughter, who is in her early 40s, never been married, has no children, and she is stuck working a job at a post office that she's not very happy with. Next, we have her older brother, Michael Straker, who is in his mid 40s. And as we learn later on, he has a wife and two young teenage daughters that bring a lot of joy to his life. So he's kind of in the opposite situation as his sister. Then we have Charlie, an elderly man with gray hair who seems to be in pretty good physical shape for his age, because as we are about to learn, he works for the family on the farm as a ranch hand living in a camper on the other side of the property. And finally, we have the nurse, who I'm pretty sure that she doesn't have a name. At least they don't say it in the movie, and I couldn't find one. So we just call her Nurse, which is fine because she's kind of a side character. Anyway, did you come across her name?
Nurse.
Yeah, we're just
Nur
gonna call her Nurse. I didn't think
nurses for
so.
the home health aide.
Yes.
That is her name.
So officially, that's what it says on her driver's license. So now that we know everybody, there are three really important things to know here. One, Charlie has obviously been working here for a very long time because he is very close with Louise and Michael, almost in a way, like another father figure to them. And two, it appears that the family is very spread out at this point, with both adult children living far away in different cities. And as we will find out later on, neither one of them call or come see their parents very often. As a matter of fact, they don't even speak to each other very often. And the reason that they are both here on this particular morning is because they got word that their father was reaching the end of his life and they needed to come see him one last time. And the third important thing that we need to know here is when Michael and Louise arrive on Monday morning, we find out that not only is Virginia upset that they're here, but according to her, she told them both repeatedly on the phone not to come here, which is obviously weird. Like, why would she not want her kids to see their father before he dies? Not to mention, to comfort her in the aftermath of his death. But she makes it very obvious she doesn't want them here, and that is really strange to Michael and Louise.
Yeah, it is strange, but it's not so strange and at a place that, that it's brought up in a way that couldn't just be written off as a very broken, kinda not very close family.
It's not supernatural strange, I agree.
Yeah,
It's just
it's,
personality strange.
it shows the viewer that this family isn't very close because
Yeah.
although it is weird to both their children, well, grown children at this point, it's weird to them, but it's can be explained by the family just not being close and there being some kind of tension.
Yeah. So upon their arrival, they immediately notice how run down and exhausted Virginia looks, Not to mention, the mood around the farm is pretty bleak and depressing, which at first is assumed to be because of the up and coming death of David. We then cut to later that evening where we see Virginia, Michael, and Louise sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner, where it becomes very obvious that there is something going on with their mother. Because after trying to start a conversation with her multiple times, she eventually freaks out, starts crying, and yells at them that it was stupid for them to come here and they need to leave, which leaves Michael and Louise stunned and confused. So confused, in fact, that after they clean up, they head out to the porch to discuss the situation, and this is where it is revealed that the family have all grown very distant, and neither one of them even remember exactly when they spoke to their parents last. And it becomes very apparent here that as their father inches closer and closer to death, the two adult children start to feel more and more guilt for putting their parents on the back burner for all these years. And in my opinion, I think that this is way more important to the story than it originally appears, which we will touch on more later.
Yeah, you also notice when when she freaks out and she leaves the dinner table, he puts his hat back on when his mom leaves. So clearly he's has that etiquette where you
Yeah,
don't wear the hat at the dinner table, and I think that really kind of shines a light on their upbringing.
yeah,
They obviously had very, very strict upbringings, and I think it shed some light on why there is some friction in this family, why they went off, moved far away, and made their own lives.
yeah, yeah, good point. So, after a bit of discussion and conversation on the porch, they then head inside where Michael informs his sister he's getting in the shower before bed, which leaves Louise to start locking all the doors and windows for the night. And right before she finishes up, the front door of the home, which she just locked, appears to be standing wide open. And as she walks over to shut it in confusion, we see the jet black silhouette of a large man standing in the doorway of her parents' bedroom watching her. But Louise never notices this, and as she is heading back towards the kitchen, we see that that large man has been replaced by a creepy Virginia who is now standing there in the dark doorway. This is a very cool panning shot. It's all just one shot, one motion.
Yeah, some awesome, awesome cinematography here, and this is kinda that scene that I compared to The
Yeah.
Strangers where he's in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It really builds a ton of tension.
And they did a really awesome job with using the natural lighting of the home because the only light in the shot is from the kitchen. And she's walking through the living room, and they let that natural shadow of that doorway really hide this evil thing sitting back there.
Yeah, yeah, it was done really good.
So a little while later, we see Michael sitting at the table going over his parents' stack of bills while his mother stands at the counter chopping vegetables again. When she suddenly starts singing that Jesus song we heard earlier, and this quickly catches her son's attention. And it's not really explained till later on, but the reason why he has this confused and concerned look on his face as she sings this song is because this whole family are atheists. They have never had affiliation or interest in the church. And from what Michael says later on, they almost see, most of religion as fear mongering, a bunch of like made up shit that causes people to be even more depressed and upset about, their situations, which is why, after 60 something odd years of her life, it's weird that Virginia would suddenly be singing songs about Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, that would be extremely concerning.
Yeah.
It's funny how this family kinda sees, religion as a way of fear-mongering for control,
Yeah.
AKA shout back to heretic.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. So it's at this point where Michael tells his mother good night, but her response is kind of weird because she tries again to get them to leave, which he immediately shoots down. And then she says, "It's not what you think." And despite him asking her, what that means, she ignores him and just goes back to what she was doing, prompting him to just give up and go to bed. And now that everybody in the house except her is in bed for the night. We then cut to one of the most memorable scenes in the film. And if you've seen this movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we then cut back to Virginia, where she is still standing there at the counter cutting vegetables, and the house is dead silent, except for the sounds of her large kitchen knife repeatedly chopping into the wooden cutting board. And while this is going on, we keep getting these close up shots of her left hand holding the carrot while the right hand holds the knife that she's using to cut. And then suddenly, just like before, she hears the sound of the chair sliding behind her. But this time, she doesn't turn and look. She instead just goes back to chopping. And as she fights her own intuition to turn around and see what's there, her anxiety begins to build and build, which causes her to chop faster and faster. When suddenly, we see her chop her own 3 fingers on her left hand off, leaving only the pinky and thumb fully intact. Virginia instantly grimaces in pain and begins to quietly cry, not wanting to wake up the others. But despite this obvious and normal reaction that we see on her face, her hand, all by itself, goes right back to chopping. But it is not chopping carrots. Instead, it is chopping up her severed 3 fingers into tiny little pieces as she is forced to stand there and watch. The camera then quickly switches back and forth between the fingers and Virginia's reaction, where we see that both are getting more and more intense as the seconds tick by, with the chops getting harder and faster as the time goes on. And then boom, the screen goes black, informing us that it is now Tuesday morning.
Some good old finger food. I think
Yeah.
she's making the just some snacks.
Yeah.
Some Caesar's finger salad.
Man, I love everything about this scene. It is done so well. The close-up shots, the creepy violin sounds, all the building of the dread and anticipation, and they 100% deliver with the finger chopping practical effect. Not only do we see that initial cut, but we then go back and see these severed fingers just mutilated by this
Yeah.
knife. Now, there's 2 things here that I think probably get overlooked by a lot of people that I think help make this scene what it is, and that is the lighting and the sound. If you look behind Virginia, all of the lights in the house are off except for this kitchen light that's above her. So she's pretty much surrounded by this dark shadow, which gives it this, boxed in feel, and it makes it feel like she's trapped, like she's been cornered by this demon. Which is why when she doesn't look back after hearing the chair, you, the viewer, start to feel that anxiety building with her to the point where you're almost hoping she does turn around and look so, you can have a sigh of relief so you could see what it is.
Yeah, payoff.
Yeah. And then the sound. The sound is so good. They have like this creepy violin or whatever, some kind of string instrument, and they're not really playing a tune. It's just kind of random creepy sounds, and it starts to pick up and get louder and more frequent as the scene goes on. Not to mention the fucking chopping. When you hear the chopping and you get that first like close up, you know like something's gonna happen with this knife in this hand. Because the chopping is very prominent. And as we go on, we hear the chopping getting louder and louder and faster. And it's such a fantastic scene. It is a great example of how to build tension and dread and excitement. And it's like, you know, this style of filmmaking is like 70% of why I even picked the movie.
Yeah, I want to shout back to the acting. She really portrays that her mind and her body are completely separate from each
Yeah,
other at
yeah.
this point. Like, she does not want to be doing what she is doing, but she has no control.
Yep.
Like, she is forcibly, you know, cutting into her hot dog fingers.
Yeah.
Like, that is what it reminds. It's like it's her it looks like she's just cutting hot dogs.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it looks so awesome. It's one of those scenes too, you see it and you know what's coming, and it's like they build this anxiety, I think the perfect amount of time
Yeah.
of going back to the close-ups of her fingers and getting closer to this knife as she's cutting, and then when you finally get the payoff, it's not just like one cut and it's over. They almost rub your face in it,
Yeah.
and it looks so good. Like,
Yeah.
it's done so well. It's so fucking creepy. Uh, 10 out of 10. Like,
Yeah,
this
I agree.
scene is fantastic.
I agree. So yeah, it's first thing Tuesday morning, and we instantly cut back to the kitchen where there's currently no sign of Virginia, but we do see the aftermath of what happened the night before because we then get some close-up shots of Virginia's blood on the floor and the cabinets, the cutting board and the sink, which also contains the bloody tip of her middle finger, still just sitting there.
Salad dressing everywhere.
Yeah. So obviously, this causes Michael and Louise to panic as they immediately run outside searching for her while frantically calling her name. And after a few minutes of looking, Louise spots her mother's body hanging from a rafter in the goat barn, very much dead at this point, prompting her and Michael to cut her down and call for help. Which, of course, because of the way she was found, it appears to everybody that Virginia finally broke under the stress and sadness of her husband's illness and committed suicide.
Yeah, the fact that she cut her fingers off first would be something I would be bringing up. Like, okay, well, if somebody's gonna commit suicide, why'd she chop her fucking hand up first?
Yeah, it's
And then it would be pretty impressive for this old woman to tie a knot with one hand, missing the fingers off of her other hand, and then get this high up in the rafters to hang herself.
yeah, I think they're just so in shock at first because some of that does get brought up a little bit later on, but that shock, initial shock, is so gut wrenching to them that they don't even think about any of this stuff.
I mean, if I remember right, there's a piece of her finger in the sink
Yeah, still in the
still.
sink. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, with that shocking reveal, we then immediately jump right into Wednesday, which starts out by showing us a still in shock Louise and Michael, who are just sitting at the kitchen table, not really knowing what to say or think, while Charlie attempts to distract himself by working on the farm and feeding the animals. And a little while later, the nurse arrives for her shift to sit with David, where she gives her condolences to the family and informs them that in the weeks leading up to yesterday, she kept noticing that when Virginia would sit next to her unconscious husband, she would seem like she was whispering to him. But the nurse could tell that something was off, almost like she was speaking to something else in the room, which gave this nurse a very unsettling feeling, especially considering she noticed a change in Virginia in how she spoke to and cared for her dying husband. And this is where it is revealed that, unlike the Straker family, this nurse is very religious, which does come back up. After this conversation, Michael starts thinking about having their father moved to a hospital for around the clock care by professionals, but Louise immediately shoots this down, telling him that she will stay with him during the nights as long as the nurse shows her what to do. And in my opinion, it is at this point in the movie you can already see that Louise is suffering from her guilt from this neglect that she did to her parents for years. She's feeling it a lot more than her brother Michael. And I, briefly mentioned it earlier, but I think guilt is a very important part of this story.
Well, I think, not just her parents, but I think with her dad in particular. And it's never really touched on fully, but I think her and her dad had a very estranged relationship. Like, I think that she probably cut him off and hasn't spoken to him in years because you see this. We have seen this in real life, but generally, like, when a family member dies and it's, you've cut them off and haven't talked to them, you feel this extra guilt
Yeah.
whenever something happens to them. And, she clearly has some of that going on, like, more than Michael does. Like, she is very much with her dad suffering from some type of regret and guilt over the way she's handled those two's relationship, because she's immediately like, I will take on the burden. I will sit with him at night. Despite all the weird shit that's already going on, she jumps at doing this.
Yeah. Well, I was sitting there thinking about it, and this was after my first watch, and then because I watched it, twice this week, and on my second watch, I really paid attention. And the reason I think she feels so much more guilty than her brother was because I think she believes Michael has a justifiable excuse for becoming, very distant over the years, which is because he's married with two kids, and he has this career, but she doesn't have a husband or kids. She hates her job. So in her mind, she was just being selfish and like focusing on herself all these years. She even apologizes to Michael on the porch about not calling her own nieces over their, birthday or whatever. So I think that this is, really what's causing her to, take her mother's death really, really hard. And then also trying to take on this burden for caring for her father in his final days, you know, while also trying to figure out like why her mom did what she did. But it's almost like she's trying to make up for what she did over the years to relieve herself of at least a tiny bit of guilt and
I
sadness.
I almost get the sense though that there was a breaking point between father and daughter. At some point, she had this big fight with her dad and hasn't spoken to him. And I think that that's why it was a little less, strange to her when her mom was like, "I told you not to come, like, you didn't need to come." She doesn't the first time that she's told this, like, she doesn't even kinda think it's weird or anything. And I think it's because specifically with these 2, like, I think she holds some little contact with her brother, a little bit of contact with her mom, but I get the sense that she hasn't talked to her dad at all, and I think it's because there was some sort of breaking point in their relationship, and she hasn't spoken to him in years.
So later that night, Louise gets frightened while in the shower by an apparition that looks like her father. But upon investigation, it is concluded that there is no way it was really him. And this is where Michael accidentally stumbles across his mother's diary, which is going to reveal a little bit about what's been going on here. I don't know about you, but I personally think this thing wanted them to find this diary because
Yeah,
it makes no sense. It just lands right where he kicks it, right on, and it's not even on his mother's side of the bed, it's on the father's side of the bed, so it
yeah.
doesn't make sense of why it would even be there.
Well, it makes sense to the story and this evil
Yeah,
entity
I
is
agree.
as to almost rub it in their face, despite them not having these beliefs, and also torment them. Like, it torments them wondering what was happening, what was causing her
Yeah,
mom to write these things, and it also obviously builds up more fear.
yeah,
Uh,
agree.
I also think if you are hallucinating your soon to be dead father, in the shower, that you should definitely take that as a huge clue that you need to get an overnight nurse. Like, you are not in the mental space
Yeah,
to take care of somebody who's dying. And, we obviously know why she's seen him, but she thinks after seeing that there's no way her dad got up, that she's just hallucinating this because of all the trauma that's gone on in the past couple days. And you would think if you were in that position and you realized that you had hallucinated this, you would not take on this burden. You'd be like, "Okay, I need to step back and let a professional take care of this.
Yeah, but she's looking at it like that's why I kinda
Guilt,
yeah,
yeah,
she's
it's like
trying to relieve some of this guilt before he dies, because
yeah.
this is really it. Like, if she can't at least make her, self feel better, like she did something for him in the end, she's gonna be stuck with this forever. So, yeah, I think she's throwing everything out the window to just try to make herself feel a little better, which goes along with the selfish thing, because she's always been selfish, kind of for years, but so once he finds this book, he brings it to his sister, who also starts looking through it. And this is where the siblings discover what exactly was going on with their mother in the days before her death. And according to Virginia, she 100% believed that the devil himself had come into their house and caused David's illness in order to steal his soul. And according to her, there is no way to stop it, which explains why she didn't want the kids there. And it is important to remember that this family didn't believe in stuff like this. So to them, this is really odd that their mother would believe any of this. So after that reveal, we then move on to Thursday, which starts out with Louise reading the diary, which informs them that their mother could see and hear the voice of this demon in her head, and it made her want to die. Also, she realizes there is no escape, and this thing is slowly killing them both. And this is where we start to see a divide between the siblings, because Louise, the more guilty one, has begun to believe her mother was right about what's going on, but Michael chalks this up to her just kind of losing her mind. And to make matters even more strange, upon visiting the funeral home director, Tim, they collect Virginia's things that she had on her when she died, which was a bag full of tiny crucifix from the local church. Now, I want to point something out in case it's not obvious. But at this point, Michael is looking for someone to blame, which has led him to believe that after his father's illness got worse, his mother started going to church for, maybe comfort. And somebody there must have begun filling her head with all this demon stuff, which, to him led to her death. This also allows him to write off all of the crazy shit happening to his sister, because it appears that she is starting to buy into whatever their mother was, writing in this diary. And now it's beginning to drive like her into madness like it did with her mother. So Michael's the guy in the movie that doesn't believe in the supernatural, and he's looking for a person to blame.
Well, I would too. If
Yeah.
if 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 my mom committed suicide and upon finding her diary, it's very clear why, and it was full of religious stuff, in particular, demons, I would wanna know who the fuck got her wrapped up in this shit.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
she had spent her whole life not believing in this, and then she just committed suicide with the thought of a demon going after her, like, I would wanna know who started this.
And especially too, because she blames David's illness on this thing, and most people would think, no, this is just a medical thing. There's
Yeah.
doesn't have to be supernatural demonic entities involved for him to have like cancer. So yeah, from his perspective, there's somebody to blame for this.
Yeah.
But Michael is about to find out that he isn't immune to all this creepy shit going on either. Because as we jump to later that night, he is awoken by the bedroom light suddenly turning on. And after some brief investigating, he is shocked to see his dead mother slightly floating in the yard, looking straight at him with a creepy ass smile on her face, followed by the sounds of her singing that song right behind him. And as he goes to flip the light on again, we see her standing in the room behind him just watching him. And that is a wrap on Thursday.
Man, what a creepy fucking scene.
Yeah.
Like, the shot of his dead mom standing behind him in the dark was phenomenal.
I don't know if I even caught it the first, like when I originally watched it years
Yeah,
ago.
it's a fucking awesome shot.
Yeah, because they,
Like,
again, use shadow to hide her.
yeah, it's one of those, just and this director does such a good job at building these shots of these, like, creepy things in the background and it building, like, dread and anxiety and anticipation, and there's never a climax. Like, it leaves you on with this feeling. Like, it's never like he turns around and sees her and there's this confrontation.
Yeah.
It's just the character doesn't know that it was there, and that makes it so much scarier. Like, as an audience member, watching this, you knowing that the character does not know what is standing behind them is so much scarier.
A lot of people compared about 4 scenes or so of this movie to the scene in Hereditary where she's up on the fucking ceiling, like, ceiling wall, just staring at her kid when he wakes up,
Yeah,
and that is a that is the same feeling that you have, because you can watch it the first time and not catch it, but then when you catch it later, it's like, "Oh, fuck," like, it's creepy, and he
yeah,
never sees her up there. And it's
yeah.
just yeah, and that is why it gets, compared to Hereditary a lot, is because there are a lot of stuff like that in both movies.
Yeah, in the background,
Mhm.
things that, you know that the character has no idea that it's there, but you as the viewer can see it. It is such an effective way to build that anxiety and dread.
Yeah, and I think that this says a lot about horror filmmaking, because if you look at it, what makes you feel more scared or unsettled? A scene like this or, Art the Clown cutting someone in half? You would think that seeing somebody, sawed in half would freak you out more than this, but just somebody hiding off in the background or behind a character in a shadow, like that actually gives you so much more feeling than, a decapitation or head explosion.
Yeah, it's the psychological
Yeah.
effect of it, and that's what makes, I think a really, really good horror movie stand out from a fun horror movie
Yeah.
is the psychological effect that it has on its audience, and this movie does such a great job at that. Hereditary was another one that did a phenomenal job at that.
So Friday kicks off with a surprise for Louise, who, remember, volunteered to sleep in her father's room at night in case of a medical emergency. And as she wakes up, she discovers that her totally unconscious dad, who is on the brink of death, drew all over her face with lipstick, which I actually found kind of funny. It would
Yeah.
have been better if he'd have drew a dick on her forehead, but
I think
yeah, I
it's
mean,
funny that she goes and immediately, like, finds the lipstick in his bed
yeah,
too, and
yeah,
she's like, "I know this old motherfucker, this is pretending to
he's
be in a
faking it.
coma, but he's fucking with me at night."
He's faking it. He's faking it. Flick him in the ball sack. You'll know if he's faking or not.
Yeah.
It's also revealed here that they are having issues with the phone working properly. So, obviously something's trying to keep them isolated. So a little later on, we see Michael returning from the store only to discover a priest standing out in the rain waiting on him. And when Michael stops, the priest alludes to the fact that this has something to do with his mother, to which he then hands him one of those tiny crosses they found in her pocket, prompting Michael to invite him to the house for a chat, because Michael believes that this must be the guy who put all of that bullshit into his mom's head. We then cut to Michael, Louise, and the priest sitting at the table, where the two siblings show him the diary with all the demon stuff in it. And this is where the priest admits that he started to come and see her because she was scared and lonely and needed someone to talk to. And you could immediately see the thick, heavy guilt wash over Louise's face when he says this. And it becomes very clear that the priest is, in a very passive aggressive way, purposely rubbing in the fact that these two neglected their parents for years, especially in their time of need. But Michael isn't letting the priest's mind games work on him as he quickly confronts the man about filling his mother's head with all of this demonic stuff. And it's here that it is revealed that none of these Straker families believed in any kind of religion. But the priest fires back, informing the two that it doesn't matter if you believe or not. The devil is still out there and can still come for you. And I love the line he says, which is, do you think a wolf cares if you believe he's a wolf? Not if he finds you alone in the woods. Really
Yeah.
cool line there.
Yeah, the priest is a fucking fantastic character. He is so creepy and really hard to get a read on. Um, I don't know what the actor's name is. I know he was in The Walking Dead.
He played Gregory at
Yeah,
they ran the hilltop. Yeah.
yeah, that guy does such a great job playing this, like,
Asshole,
yeah,
terrible person.
yeah, he's like, but at this point in the movie, like, you don't know really, like, you get the sense that there's something wrong with him, but you don't know for sure. Like, you don't have the evidence.
Yeah.
And he just plays that, like, kind of a rat.
He's like he's like
It's like a
silver tongue
fucking
too, you
yeah,
know? Like
yeah,
he can slick talk his way into his way into situations or whatever, give out all these excuses. He's, almost that used car salesman kind of thing, but he's also using a lot of passive aggressiveness against them.
yeah, and, I don't blame the brother for,
Oh yeah.
being pissed
Yeah, that
after reading the diary, thinking that this guy put all this shit in her head, and then the conversation very clearly makes you believe that he is 100% who was responsible for this.
yeah.
But on his part too, he has now seen some really creepy shit. So you gotta think, like, psychologically, that's kind of fucking with him a little bit too. Like, okay, had he not seen his mom, like, floating out the window at night, and then that really creepy scene we just talked about, like, he would, 100% put the blame on him like he is, but you gotta think as a character, he is also thinking about the weird shit that has happened. Like, especially whenever he makes the point of, "Do you think a wolf cares if you think he's a wolf? Like, not if he catches you at night?" Like, that whole thing that of him seeing his mom has to be in his head even a little bit during this conversation, even though he doesn't show it, and he completely is like, "Fuck you for putting all this in her head." You gotta think there's a part of him that thinks, "Is there something else going on? Like,
Well,
there's gotta be something else at play here."
Well, I think he's at this stage where he's trying to come up with a rational explanation because if you notice, he hasn't said anything about this yet. He hasn't
Yeah,
told anybody. So I think he's spending all this time trying to come up with an excuse that's separate from supernatural.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying, though, like, he's clearly trying to come up with a rational explanation, but he knows there's no rational explanation for what he's seen. And it's like he's having a really hard time coming to terms
Yeah,
with what
I
he
agree.
actually seen.
Yeah, so it's at this point where things finally boil over after the priest finally admits that he told Virginia that the devil himself was behind her husband's sickness and her mental anguish, which leads to Michael kicking him out. And even as tempers flare and he's just getting up to leave, the priest continues to just dig into the fact that Michael and Louise weren't there for their mother and are partially responsible for her suicide and that he was the one that was there for her.
And he's right. Like, in that sense, like, he's digging in at such, like, an exposed nerve
Yeah.
because you gotta think they're thinking, like, "Had we been there, she would have never turned to this guy."
Yeah, and Michael is defensive right now, but really the target is Louise.
Yeah.
because she's sitting over there just getting, hammered on. So later that night, we see them both sitting on the porch talking about the situation where Michael finally tells Louise about seeing their mother the night before and how much it fucked him up. And this is where he drops a bit of a bomb on her. He then goes on to tell her that when he saw her in the yard, he just knew it wasn't really her. And what he means by that is this wasn't her ghost. This wasn't her spirit walking around with like unfinished business. This was something dark and evil that has taken the form of their dead mother in order to fuck with him.
Yeah.
So later that night, Louise and Michael are suddenly awoken by loud sounds on the porch. And when they look out there, what do they see? The creepy fucking preacher who immediately asked them to come outside. And Michael's pissed at this point, throwing open the door and asking him what the hell he's doing here at 3 a.m. But when Louise shines the flashlight on the mysterious man, they notice he looks a little different because he now has solid white eyes and creepy blue veins on his skin. And just when things can't get any weirder, he looks up at them, smiles, and says, "Want some rope?" before quickly disappearing after the phone rings. After that, we then cut to Charlie, who is sitting in his camper desperately trying to call Michael. And after repeated attempts, Charlie eventually abandons the plan once he hears something inside his home. And this prompts him to load his gun and go investigate. And after entering the living room, he is devastated to see the demon has taken the form of a sliced up dead Louise, who is still holding the knife that she is using to cut herself with over and over again. So after a very brief confrontation, Charlie drops to his knees, begging the demon to just tell him what it wants, where it then leans in real close and whispers something in his ear that causes him to put the barrel of the gun in his mouth and pull the trigger. So if you haven't caught on yet, this demon has the power to cause you to kill yourself against your will, which is exactly what happened to Virginia, and now it's Charlie, which actually explains a lot if you read between the lines.
Well, it's almost like it has the power to get you to kill yourself. Um, but for those who are strong enough to fight it, this demon comes up with situations that are so dreadful, it makes you kill yourself.
Yeah, what we're seeing.
Like if you won't give in to it taking over your body, it will put you in a situation that makes you so dreadful that you will take your life on your own terms.
Yeah, and we're essentially seeing this entity as a stand-in for something that is here in real life, which we will, if you haven't picked up on it, we will make it, clearer in the end. But yeah, this is all going to come together later on. So after poor old Charlie's death, we then cut to Saturday morning where we see the two siblings are totally confused by why there isn't any evidence of the priest really being there last night. And this is where Louise finally agrees with Michael's plan to just take David to the hospital so they can all get the fuck out of here. So after that conversation, we then see Louise attempt to call the priest about last night, whose name is Father Thorne, and he gave her a number yesterday when he visited. But when he answers the phone, he is totally confused by who she is and where she's even calling from. Louise then tries explaining it in more detail, but Thorne cuts her off and informs her that this number belongs to a hotel that he is temporarily staying in Chicago. And as a matter of fact, he's never even been to Texas. This information floors Louise when suddenly Thorne cuts her off again, now very angry, believing this to be some kind of joke. Because it is then revealed that he once had a daughter named Louise that died many years ago, whose voice sounds exactly like the one he is speaking with now. And after that crazy shit is dropped on her, Louise gets very freaked out and emotional, leading to her to quickly end the call. So next we see that Michael has called in a local doctor to come look at his father in order to get approval to move him to a hospital. But unfortunately, that plan goes up in smoke once the doctor informs them that David is so close to death, he will die before he even gets to the main road, meaning Michael and Louise are stuck here until he dies. After that, we then get a scene where Michael is talking to the nurse, who explains to him that even though they don't believe in religion, she knows for a fact there are horrible and wicked things out there that come for whoever it wants. Whether you believe or you don't believe, it doesn't matter to the evil in the world. But according to her, there's a bright side to this situation because she believes there is a real love in this house, and love is all you need to keep David's soul out of the clutches of this demon. Now, this is a very informative conversation if you pay close attention.
Yeah, she also brings up dying alone is the absolute worst thing that could happen. And I think that this is something that really sticks in Louise's head, and becomes very important
It
in the
does, yeah.
into this movie. And I want to go back to the phone call with the priest. So with this guy not, not knowing the family at all, that means that they're this priest coming to their house at 3 in the morning and clearly looking like some type of demon. Um, this thing is disguising himself as this priest.
Yeah.
And if they really think about it, that means that their mom was face to face confiding in the very evil she was trying to protect her husband and
Yeah.
family against.
100%.
Like, it is like the enemy is you're literally telling the offense the exact plays you're gonna run on defense.
Yeah.
Like, that is just horrifying.
She's
Like,
a,
the one person that she had to go back to and tell everything that she's thinking and feeling was the very evil that she's trying to protect herself against. Like, that's horrifying.
and she wouldn't have needed to confide in someone else if her kids would have had, more to do with them, occupied more space in their life.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
this, causes her to feel even more guilty. Yeah. So, when it comes to like the people, who don't like this movie because they don't, ever get a why when it comes to the demon, fucking with this family. The whole point is there doesn't need to be a reason evil sets its sight on you. Evil's whole thing is to torment people and cause, so much sadness and despair and grief that you lose the will to live. And it doesn't matter if you're religious or you're not, or if you like invited it in by like something you did, or even if you deserve it. Evil doesn't care. Evil doesn't discriminate, which is the whole point of the movie.
Well, evil also feeds on, grief
Yeah.
and suffering, um, dysfunctionality between family members, and that's very much apparent in this family. Like, there is a shit ton of dysfunction, there's a ton of grief, and that makes it so easy to pick this family off one by one.
Yeah, it's like a
And
buffet, you know?
yeah, you notice and like once you get to the end of this movie, if you really go back and pay attention, the lack of communication between everybody and the distance between everybody made it so much easier for this evil to torment this family.
Yep. So next we cut to the shot of a three-legged goat, which is trying its best to hop back to the goat barn when Michael spots it, and he realizes that its fourth leg has been violently ripped off like it had been attacked. And to make matters even more confusing, he also notices that all the other goats are missing. And this prompts him and his sister to go looking for them on the property, where they discover that the whole pack of goats had been brutally slaughtered on the other side of the field. And it's immediately apparent that this wasn't done by a person or a predator because the goats weren't eaten or dragged off. They are just ripped into pieces just to fuck with these two, just to fuck with these siblings.
Yeah, the overhead shot too of them standing in the middle of all these sheep,
Oh yeah,
it
dude.
looks so great.
Yeah, it's a little CGI, but I can live with that. That's fine. But it is a good shot. It is a great shot.
Yeah, I think it's far enough away where the
It doesn't bug you.
CGI
Yeah,
does is not bad.
yeah,
But it's such a cool shot
yeah. They're just standing in the
and
middle of like 60 fucking just shredded goats.
it's almost very, kind of a really good metaphor, for what's going on. Like, these 2 are in the middle of all of this evil,
Yeah.
all
Oh,
of
good
these
point.
shredded up goats, and they're kinda trapped and
Yeah.
confined in the middle of this, and they could have just up and left when all this stuff started, but it is essentially their grief that is keeping them there. This guilt of the not being there for their family. Luis seemed specifically with their dad, and then Michael Moore with his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of just up and leaving as soon as all this shit started, they're being held there by their guilt and grief. And I think that this shot of them in between all these slaughtered goats is a perfect picture of what is going on metaphorically.
Yeah, and there's also, especially if you think to the beginning, more the first half of the movie, there we hear wolves, howling. The priest talks about, the devil being a wolf, and it's very apparent that the people are the sheep, right? And literally we're seeing the symbolic the very gruesome murder of these sheep, the very evil action of just tearing them apart for no reason.
Yeah, I seen somebody made a really good point too. We hear this wolf howl very early in the movie.
Yeah.
It's like the very beginning we hear this wolf howling at night, and there is no wolves in Texas.
Oh, good point. I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
did not know that.
So that is a very good indication that, and we'll get to it when we start talking about the theories and what's behind all of this. But it makes that make a lot more sense.
Yeah. By the way, that goat is a real three-legged goat that lives on the farm owned by the Bertino family.
Huh.
Yeah, totally, lives its life as I guess they just probably just did, prosthetics or maybe CGI or something for the bloody stump that was, like, hanging off of it, but yeah, definitely a real three-legged goat that they have there on the property.
Behind the scenes, there is this three-legged goat bitching about the 3 hours of makeup
Yeah,
that it
prosthetics.
had to have for, 2 minutes of camera time.
So it's at this point in the story that there's no longer any doubt that something supernatural is taking place here, with both Michael and Louise pretty scared and scrambling to find a way to get their dad and themselves as far away from this place as possible before it's too late. And after a brief conversation with his sister, Michael heads out to the barn to help the remaining goats, where he encounters the demon who again takes the shape of his dead mother. But this time, she's naked, very dead looking, and singing the Jesus song that he heard on the first night. I think it was like an episode or two ago, you mentioned the A24 naked old lady titties. Here it
Yeah.
is. We got
Yeah,
it.
naked old women, man. It is a reoccurring theme in horror.
Also hereditary. It is
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Oh, it's in The Shining.
Yeah.
It's in a ton of horror movies. Like
Yeah, both of
na
those movies have been compared to this. Yeah.
yeah, X. Yeah. There's tons and tons of movies that I would have never guessed that naked old women was such a reoccurring theme in horror, which I guess isn't good for the women out there listening.
Yeah. Naked
Aging is not not You are literally going to turn into a theme that is used in horror.
Yeah, that's true.
That is a horror movie in itself, but, don't feel bad because saggy balls would, I'm sure, be a theme too if, more women were directors.
Yeah, that's true.
Because no director wants to put old saggy balls in their movie.
So once he is confronted up close by the demon, he falls to the ground, places his pocket knife against his own neck, and right before he cuts himself, he is able to regain his control, and he fights off the demon's will, pulling the knife away and throws it across the barn. And needless to say, this is Michael's breaking point because what he does next shocks his sister. So after that, we then cut to Sunday morning, which is the final day in our story. And pretty much immediately, we see Louise is very confused because she can't find her brother anywhere. And after repeated calls to his cell phone, she discovers that he said, "Fuck this," and left in order to go back home to his family, leaving his sister there all alone with their dying father and this powerful demon. But Louise is soon startled by a sudden knock on the door, and when she opens it, she is surprised to see a young woman standing there, informing her that she is Charlie's granddaughter and that Charlie was found dead in his camper from a self inflicted gunshot wound. And this news floors Louise, who is immediately thrown even deeper into the clutches of grief and despair, which is exactly what this demon wants. In a barely holding it together, Louise then goes to check on her father, inviting the girl in, telling her that she's actually happy someone else is here, but it pretty quickly becomes apparent that this girl is not who she says she is, as she then looks at Louise with a smile on her face and asks if she can smell David's body rotting. And she also informs her that it is almost time before vanishing just like the priest did. And after that, we then see the nurse arrive for her shift caring for David, and she immediately picks up on how freaked out and emotionally drained Louise is. She then heads into the bedroom, lights a candle with a saint on it, and says a prayer for him, hoping that it will help fight off this entity that wants his soul. And then something really important happens. While she's sitting down, crocheting a blanket, she suddenly hears Louise break down crying in the other room from so much loss and despair, which causes her to feel even more grief and sadness for this family. And that is what allows this demon to enter her body and take control. And even though we can see that she's trying to fight it and try to take back control of her own body, she ends up stabbing herself in the face with one of the needles before attacking Louise and knocking her unconscious. Once she's totally knocked out, we then cut to the nurse dragging her body into the living room while continuing to pray to Jesus for help, which tells us that this nurse, she's still in there. She just can't control what her body's doing, which is really terrifying.
Yeah. Her whole scene is her, back and forth
Yes.
between trying to be a good person and control her body, but she clearly has no control over the body. I do wanna go back to the granddaughter too coming in. The whole, "Do you smell him? I can smell him. I can smell his rotting already." That shit was so fucking creepy.
Yeah.
Like, ugh. The idea of this, demon, coming in, talking about smelling his rotting body. He's so close to death, I can already smell his rotting.
It's very creepy,
It's
yeah.
so fucking, just ugh.
Yeah. So after begging over and over again for Jesus to save her, the demon finally decides to put an end to her life by forcing her to commit suicide by stabbing herself in the eyes with the crochet needle. It's a really her death is actually really interesting because you can see even as she is bleeding to death, her and this demon are going back and forth over who's controlling her body because one of her last movements is literally trying to you know she knows she's dying,
Well,
and she's asking like Jesus or whatever to
well,
like,
if you notice, she says, I can see the Lord." And then the demon immediately makes her stab her eyes out with the
yeah,
crochet needles, which I thought was such a good touch.
yeah, yeah. She has a very interesting death. I find it very creepy but fascinating at the
Yeah,
same
she's
time.
like, I can see my savior, I can see hope in my religion still," and immediately, like, stabs her eyeballs out.
You have to really pay attention to her death to really understand it. I didn't get it the first time.
Yeah, she's also, like, as she's dragging the leash, she's, like, saying, like, "Stay with me, I'm
Yeah,
gonna get help," but, like, her brain and her body are on complete separate pages,
yep.
and it's one of the rare times where you can see in a movie somebody's body is possessed, but their brain is not,
Yeah, yeah, that's what's so interesting about it.
and I think that makes it so much more horrifying
Yep,
to
I
have your
agree.
body taken over, but your brain is still there.
So, once the nurse eventually drops dead in the living room next to a still unconscious Louise, we then cut to Michael, who is just arriving home from the trip and is excited to see his family. But upon walking into the house, it seems like at first nobody's home. That is until he heads towards the kitchen where he discovers something that is going to destroy him in every way possible. And then, as he slowly steps through the doorway, he spots his two daughters sitting at the table, lifeless and pale, with blood still dripping from their necks after having their throats slashed from behind. And as a final nail in the coffin, Michael then spots the body of his wife, who is on the floor behind the two girls, also dead from an apparent suicide, still holding the knife that killed their daughters, meaning his wife murdered their two children and then killed herself right before he got back. This obviously devastates him in a way that he never even thought possible, launching a barrage of pain, heartache, and grief that is impossible to numb in any way.
Well, think about this too, like, all this shit happened to his mom because he wasn't there, and then he gets back and then finds his wife has murdered his daughters and killed herself because he wasn't there.
Yeah,
Like, imagine what would go through his head at that moment.
yeah, true. And this is what leads Michael to pull out his pocket knife, place it to his throat, and slash his own neck, having no longer the will to live. But this is where something truly evil is revealed. After Michael cuts himself and begins bleeding to death, the bodies of his wife and daughters suddenly vanish, along with any evidence they were ever dead, making him realize right before his own death that the demon tricked him into killing himself after the failed attempt last night in the goat barn. And the cherry on top of all of this is just mere seconds after Michael dies, his very much still alive wife and daughters walk into the door after a fun day of shopping, only to discover the body of her husband and their father, laying on the kitchen floor, surrounded by his own blood, still holding the knife that he used to kill himself. What a fucked up ending for him. Like, I remember, I was shocked and confused when the first time I seen the movie. This is what burnt the movie into my head years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, I'd seen it a while back, and you had told me I had seen it, and it was this scene that I was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember." As soon as he walked in, like, before it even showed his family, as soon as he opened up that door, I was like, "Oh, shit,
Yeah.
I remember this." And this is what I was saying about, like, for the people who do fight it and are able to overcome being possessed into killing themselves, it creates a situation, by manipulating the surroundings that essentially makes you do it for the demon.
Yeah, the,
Like
the demon realizes that the mom, the dad, and the sister were not enough. Like, Michael had something bigger, more important to live for. So he tricked him to take that away.
Yeah, you remember that the night before he left, he fights slitting his own throat. Like, the demon
Yeah.
tries to take him
Yep.
over, and he's able to fight it, and I think the same thing happened with Charlie, I believe it is,
Yeah.
the family friend who works on the farm. He's obviously able to fight this shit to where it creates a situation where his granddaughter shows up, and she's all, like, bloodied up and killing herself and stabbing herself, and it whispers in his ear to just kill himself, to
Yeah.
just finish it,
Yep.
and that's super horrifying. Like, if this demon can't get you to do it yourself, it's going to create a situation where that's all you want is to end it.
Yeah, this whole scene just really reinforces the idea that evil doesn't give a fuck about the details of your life. Like, it's here to do maximum damage to you emotionally to the point where your soul is affected and, possibly so much it's to the extent where you can't recover. I saw people in the message boards express confusion about the phone call to the priest where, he reveals he had a daughter named Louise that died. And people were really confused about how or why he was like brought into this. And the answer is the same as like, why Michael's wife and kids were, forced to find Michael dead on the floor, why it was timed this way. Not only is the demon's goal to destroy this family in every way possible, but also to hurt anybody in the vicinity of the family as well. Charlie is really another good example. This evil entity doesn't care about anything but pain and suffering. And to the demon, the more the better. And
Almost as if the demon is able to live by feeding off of people's suffering and despair, and almost like a vampire would feed off of blood.
yeah, I
Like,
actually did see some people consider this some kind of emotional vampire, which was a
well
really good idea.
well, it very much is, and we'll get into that more at the end, but, yeah, this is, there is some classic vampire movies that the vampires didn't feed directly off of blood, but they fed off of despair and emotion in the same way that a demon would. And we'll touch more on the vampire stuff when we get to the end. But
Yeah, to explain the priest thing too is this demon literally reached out and grabbed this priest who had went through losing a child. And this it's been so long, he doesn't think about it all the time. And this demon just used this guy to just get more, grief out of somebody that's literally in, states
well,
away.
if you notice too, he says you sound just
Yeah.
like her.
It
And the
uses
demon
her.
is using her voice to sound just
Mhm.
like his granddaughter who had killed herself,
Yeah, and it
possibly battling the same demon.
could have been. It's just it goes to show you that all this thing wants is maximum destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's everybody and now it's got Michael's wife and kids. Now they have walked into this mess. So after Michael's grim ending, we then cut back to the farm where we see it is now nighttime and Louise has finally woken up, only to see her father in the next room gasping for air. But unfortunately for him, she decides to use this opportunity to escape while she can, getting up and limping towards the door. And right as she makes it to the porch, she trips and falls, tumbling into the yard, which causes her to hear her father begin to cough. Fearing that without her there and her love for him by his side, the demon will finally be able to take his soul and kill him. That and the fact that she feels so much guilt for the past few years, she races back inside to be there for her dad in his final moments. Now,
You remember the nurse too.
yep, I was about to say,
Yeah.
yeah. The nurse mentions to them earlier in the movie that the worst thing that can happen to a person is to die alone. She also follows that up by telling them as long as their love for their father is present, the demon can't take his soul, which comes from, her belief in religion. And the reason I bring this up is because that is what Louise is relying on right now. Like, she thinks as long as she's by his side, choosing him over her own fear and self-preservation, this demon will be defeated.
Now,
That's her game plan. So when she makes it back inside to her dad, she immediately starts hearing Michael's voice yelling for her to help him from the other room. But believing this to just be a trick to get her away from her dad, even for a few seconds, which would allow the demon a chance to kind of move in, she decides to remain defiant and stay put. And at first, this seems to be the right choice because as soon as she yells, "Stay away," the voice stops. And David starts to gasp for his last bit of breath, causing Louise to lean in real close and tell him that she loves him and she refuses to leave. And right before he takes his last couple gasps of air, everything stops. All the creepy noises, the creaking house, the sounds of her now dead brother like yelling for her, and like just like that, and she can even feel the air get lighter as her love for her father like overcomes this evil. David then dies right there in front of her as she's begging him not to leave her here alone. And this is where she gets flooded with sadness and heavy, heavy grief as she then shakes her father's now limp body, demanding that he come back. And then, out of nowhere, she begins to hear her mother singing that Jesus song from the next room. And right as she turns to look, we see David open his eyes before ultimately lurching forward and attacking her, and the screen goes black. A few seconds later, the camera settles on the outside of the house, where we start to hear screams from the demon mixed with the horrifying screams of Louise, which means the nurse was wrong. Neither your love for someone or your religious beliefs can stop evil. The unfortunate fact here is evil set its sights on the Straker family, and there was nothing that could be done to stop it. And what, Bertino was really trying to say here with the whole movie was, people like to assume the great evil in the world has a conscience, believing it's, more akin to a man rather than a force. But, that's not true. Evil's a force of nature, at least, his opinion, and it doesn't choose its victims based off of religion, actions, or, even how good or bad of a person you are, just like a tornado doesn't care or even choose who or what's in its path. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and, that's what happened to the Straker family here. But that is the end of The Dark and the Wicked.
yep. Uh, so I got a good freeze frame of the dad as he is like right before the movie ends. Um, he's clearly biting at her throat when the
Yes.
movie ends.
Mhm.
This movie is very much a vampire movie.
Oh,
Um,
good. I did not catch that. That was a good point.
oh yeah, I thought that you did catch that. I thought we were gonna go into that. Yeah. So we get the shot of the vampire within the goats in the beginning, the one that I showed you the picture I lightened, very much a traditional image of a vampire. So the shot of the dad, as he is biting at her neck at the very end, he very much looks like a vampire. I'll show you that shot too. But yeah, it's a vampire, but a lot of vampire folklore focuses heavily on shape-shifting, like real life vampire folklore,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
vampires are able to shapeshift. We get a really, really good shot of it's at one point in the movie where it's the shadow of this hand, and it's almost a dead-on shot of
Nosferatu,
Nosferatu, the
yeah.
original
Mhm.
Nosferatu. If you notice with the priest that is calling them, because he can't come in the house, and he's calling them to come out to the door.
Yeah, that's another good
We
one.
we also get the, Charlie's granddaughter that hesitates coming in and asks, like, "Are you sure if I can come in?" Because she has to be invited into the house.
She actually never fully gets in the house. She only stands in the doorway,
Yeah.
closest she ever gets.
Yeah, so that goes back to the folklore of a vampire having to be invited in, and then there's a lot of folklore on vampires not just feeding on the physical blood, but feeding on grief and, slowly feeding on its victims until it's dead, AKA the dad. As this vampire is slowly sucking the life force out of him until the very end of the movie, and as soon as he dies, he turns. So we don't know what exactly causes a vampire to choose who's going to be fed off of and become a vampire, but clearly throughout the movie, it causes as much grief as possible because this vampire is feeding off of not only grief, but the dad's body as he lays there until he fully creates his transformation into a vampire when he dies.
Yeah, that's all really interesting. I did not connect any kind of vampire or, folklore. When I originally watched it before I did it really any research, my theory was essentially that, you know, this is just a force of nature. Evil's not necessarily any kind of religious there's no kind of religious aspect to it. It is this thing that essentially goes around and just feeds off of destruction, chaos, sadness, and grief. And a lot of this was essentially backed up by a lot of what Bryan Bertino has actually said about the movie. Like, according to him, the demon in this story is a metaphor for the horrors of grief and regret. And he said, quote, "Grief can overwhelm you so much that you feel that you have no reason to keep living," which is, what we were saying. This is why the demon throughout the movie has to put grief on these people. The demon can't kill you. He has to make you so fucking sad that you kill yourself, which is exactly what, like, grief can do. And when you think back to all the kills, that's, exactly how the demon was able to get the characters to kill themselves. And, there's the whole thing with Michael in the barn where it fails and all that. And another really important thing is, like, when referencing the religious aspect in the movie, Bertino said that, he didn't want this to be like all these other possession films where God and love and all that helps the character defeat the devil in the end. Because in this movie, the demon is a metaphor for extreme grief and depression, and he wanted religion not to save you from the situation, because it can't save you from grief in real life, but instead offer you comfort in that situation, making the religious aspect much more realistic than all those other films.
So that is the image of the fully
Which is very
turned
similar
father.
to what we saw in the barn in the
Uh-huh.
beginning. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
and he's biting down at her throat.
Yeah, Bernardino, like, he never said anything really about any vampire or lore, but I definitely think that it was purposely laid over top of his idea of evil just being like a force of nature,
Yeah.
a random force of nature.
Well, and
Uh,
that goes back into a lot of vampire folklore that these are demonic evil entities. And I think that the Nosferatu reference was very clear. There's another reference to a old Universal vampire movie. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it's in the very beginning of this movie. So there's a couple direct references to classical vampire movies, and I think it very much preys on the folklore of vampires and not traditional vampires that just suck blood, but the old, like, real life folklores of vampires being able to shapeshift, feeding on grief, you know, there's a ton of different layers to it, but if you go back and watch this movie with the idea that this is a vampire movie and that this is a vampire, stalking them and not vampire in the traditional sense that it just sucks blood, but a vampire that feeds off of grief, I think it completely puts this movie in a completely different light.
Yeah, I pulled every quote that Bryan Bertino ever, said about this, and he unfortunately does not say very much at all about really the meaning of it. He does, pretty much the things that I listed in this episode is what he said, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of that is he wants people to try to figure it out. Like, this isn't a movie for everybody. This is a movie for people who want to look really hard at the evidence and try to stumble upon what he was doing here. But I do love what he does where he almost, I don't want to say like he's, you know, uh, taking a jab at all these possession films, but he sets up the whole thing of religion is going to save you, and it doesn't,
Yeah.
because it doesn't in real life. It helps and it comforts you, but it doesn't solve your problems.
No, no, evil things happen every day to great people, and some of those great people are very religious and do go to church and live their life, by whatever book that they practice, and that doesn't stop horrible things from happening to them.
Yeah, have you ever seen somebody who went to church and they were really good and something really bad happens, like they die or their family member dies, and you think, "Man, how could someone that poured so much devotion into God, why would God do that to them?" This is a much clearer answer, where it's not necessarily God's doing it to them. There's just an evil in the world that feeds off of this, and there's nothing you can do to stop. There's no magic answer or magic prayer or thing you can do that's just gonna defeat it like the movies.
Or you see awful, awful things happening to kids.
Yeah, good
Like
example.
kids that get, kidnapped and all types of horrible things, and you're thinking, what could a kid possibly do to deserve this? And there is no deserving. It's just evil. And sometimes you're in the path of evil and there is no exact cause of it. You're the same way with the going back to the tornado reference.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just the wrong place at the wrong time, the wrong set of circumstances. The weather just happened to, you know, 20 things happen with the weather that align to create this awful E5 tornado that's about to rip through your house in the middle of a field when the whole planet exists, and it just happens to rip through the middle of your home because evil is random. Evil comes at random times. There is no um set, laid out direction for avoiding it.
Yeah. I religion has done a really good job at making everyone believe that, evil in the world is a man, is something with a conscience that has a plan. But I like this movie kinda gave me a much different outlook of it, is evil's a lot more closer to a force of nature than a person or a conscience that's just doing evil shit. Like, it's much more similar to a tornado, a earthquake, you randomly get struck by lightning and die. Like, it's much more closer to Mother Nature than it is in just an evil person,
Yeah.
an evil soul or whatever, spirit, whatever it is. Um, but yeah, and I love the way this movie portrays it, and I think it's so much closer to, the bad things in the world. But yeah, that's what made me like this movie so much more.
I'm telling you, next time you watch this movie, think of it as a vampire movie, and I think it'll completely change the way you see it.
All right. So there's no facts. I literally burnt through everything I could find on this movie. So we're going straight to ratings and kill count. We got a total of 6 kills. Number 1 is Virginia, who sliced off her fingers and then hung herself. Number 2 is Charlie, who shot himself in the head. Number 3 is Michael, who slashed his own throat. Number 4 is the nurse, who stabbed herself in the eyes with the needle things. Number 5 is David, who naturally died from illness. And number 6 is Louise, who was attacked by the demon in David's body. All right, so favorite kill, and this is my pick. I'm up first. I went with Virginia. That whole scene is awesome. The atmosphere is perfect. The effect with the fingers looks good. The sound, just a masterclass in suspense. And my runner up is going to be David because honestly, it's a good setup. I did not see that coming. I
Yeah.
loved it. I thought it was great, man. Great fucking way to do the last kill.
So I also went with Virginia. I don't think that you could possibly watch this movie and not uh, absolutely think that that was fantastic. Like it's the finger cutting, the setup to it, the hanging in the barn, like the cinematography, even the back shot of her hanging there, all done incredible. I don't think that there's any way that somebody could pick a favorite kill and not land on that. That's just fantastic. My number 2 was Michael, just because it's so fucked up. Like, it is what burned this movie into my memory. It's what unlocked the memory of me watching this. As soon as I seen him walk through that door, I knew. I was like, "Oh god, I remember this."
Yeah, I battled back and forth with myself over how could I can necessarily consider like Michael's kill over either one of the other ones. As a whole, the kill that I thought was amazing, as a scene or as it has the one that had the most effect on me was Michael for sure.
Michael,
That is an awesome setup.
dude, him gargling too after he cuts his throat and then noticing that his family is didn't really kill themselves, and then you see his wife and his excited daughters coming through the door and what they're about to walk into while he's still alive. Like
Yeah,
he's like gargling and on the way to death. And it's just so fucked up.
yeah.
It's I 100% did not want his character to die. I thought it was super awful, but I picked it at number 2 because of how much it affected me.
It's literally the second or maybe even best scene in the movie
Yeah,
as a whole, the whole scene.
and it
Yeah, great.
surprises you. Like, you don't see it coming.
No,
You don't
yeah.
see, like, the whole uh, even with his family, like, before you find out they didn't die, like, that whole thing is super shocking. And then you get the ball dropped on you that it never actually happened. It was this demonic entity putting this hallucination in his mind. Like, it has taken enough hold of him to make him completely see this. Um, it's just one of those, like, super surprising kills. It reminds me of The Mist, like,
Yeah,
the
it's
very
true.
end.
Mhm.
Super fucked up.
Alright, so on to rating. I gave this movie a 4.7. I originally had it sitting actually a little lower because there's a few things that I wasn't originally clear on when I watched it, the first time. So, I went looking for answers, and that's when I discovered, some of the stuff that the director, writer had mentioned. This movie gets trashed a lot because people don't think there are any answers given, but I was determined, like, when I went to do this the second time, like, I'm gonna find out there's answers here, I know there is. But yeah, man, I love how that message is buried deep, deep in the film, and you gotta really dig for it. actually like that. Most people probably hate that. But yeah, everything about this movie is great. The cinematography is perfect. The acting is really, really good. The atmosphere, 10 out of 10. The fucking setting, like, I don't know if they could have had a more perfect setting. It's just a really good, really well-made film. I hate that COVID, like, fucked over the release. Hopefully this episode sends people its way and, clears up some confusion and issues people have about that ending. But great movie all the way around, 4.7. I only deducted a little bit of points because of some of the CGI I didn't really like. There's not a lot of it in there, very small amount, but, yeah, 4.7 for me.
I gave this one a 4.2. I initially had it a little lower as well, uh, but upon digging and finding the vampire comparisons, and I think the director specifically did not mention vampires, because it's one of those movies you gotta kinda dig for,
Yeah.
but when you look at the traditional history and folklore of real vampires and them being these demonic evil entities, it fits right in with this movie and the demonic side of it. That just made the movie so much better for me, because there is a couple, like I said, the Nosferatu hand and stuff that is clearly a reference to old vampire movies, but yeah, that definitely bumped it up for me. The cinematography is by far one of the coolest things of this whole thing. The symbolism, the score, I think, is one thing that gets very much overlooked. Like you
Yeah.
were talking about with the violin and the violin's just like during that scene playing these like minor strings. It's
It's
not even
no
playing
melody.
anything. Yeah, it's just like minor, like creepy, unsettling, just it is one of those things where you could blindfold yourself and hear it, and it gives you this sense of dread. Anytime a score can do that, it's fantastic. But yeah, overall, man, the shining star of this thing is by far the feeling and the tone and how dark it is.
Agree.
It absolutely makes this movie.
Agree. Well, that is our thoughts on The Dark and the Wicked. Once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoyed the show. Check out the website, check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or your bloody three-legged goat about the show. And we hope to see you next time.